The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Well, welcome, family. Welcome, one and all, to another fine episode. This is actually episode number 7. I think. Are we 7? Yeah, number 7.
Yes.
And Article 7 coming out of this wonderful book, The Language of the Heart. This show is called Walking Through the Language of the Heart, looking at Bill W.'s Grapevine writings. And on the phone with me, of course, is our good friend and co-host, Mr. Chris S. Good day, my friend.
What's happening, Monty? Good to be on here with you.
Yeah, it always is. I enjoy it so much. I went back and I was doing some editing on the website and cleaning some stuff up, and I was listening to one of the Walking Through the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions episode that we did when we did that series, and I just enjoy it so much. I got to say, and this is just a shameful plug, but you and I work together well.
I'm telling you, I've really, really enjoyed this is the third one that we've done. I hope we can figure out what to do next.
I know, right? I'm sure we will. All right. So this article is entitled Safe Use of Money. I just chuckle at the article because I want to check my pocketbook when I read that, So what are we doing with this?
Well, just a little bit of context. Like by this time, this is May 1946. By this time, Bill had been attacked like mercilessly from people that were out in Ohio for his his swindling of AA money or whatever. And
right.
And what Bill actually had to do was he had to have an accounting firm, a licensed accounting firm, go over all of the books, like since day one of the formation of this society, and have an accounting firm actually basically put together a report showing that every single dime was accounted for in a proper way.
Yeah.
So I want to throw that in because I think that's going to have a little bit of context in how he feels about this topic of the safe use of money.
Well, and We've heard people over the years, right? Naysayers and people that are critical of Bill make statements like, well, he's just trying to get rich off AA and he's just a moneymaker, and he was just a loser of a stockbroker. I mean, he really wasn't going anywhere. He's a shyster. And we've heard all of it if we've been around the rooms any length of time, right?
Yeah, and people like to take somebody down a peg.
Yeah.
Listen, it's not really unusual. It's not just our society.
No.
People like to take people down a peg.
Yeah.
And there was some wacky stuff that was going on with the money. They got the $5,000 from the Rockefeller Foundation, and then they put together the fraudulent stock certificates, so people could have a piece of a book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And there was some crazy stuff going on, but I don't see any of it. I don't see any of it outside the scope of acceptable. It was unorthodox, a lot of it, but it was what we needed to happen for this society to get started.
Sure. Sure. You bet.
Now last week, just quickly back to last week, I thought last week was really a significant piece of writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Historically, I think it's the first time he fully fully worked out the 12 traditions. And it was like the first writing about it. And I enjoyed so much going through that with you last week. And what he promised us at the end of last week was to help free discussion, I would like to amplify the 12 points of tradition in the future Grapevine pieces. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start breaking up pieces of the traditions as we know them today and see what Bill's original foundational thoughts were about these traditions. And I think it's going to be really interesting.
Nice.
All right. So we'll start reading. This is my page 24, Safe Use of Money. And it was published in May of 1946, which is exactly 10 years before I was born.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I'm like an old man. Anyway.
Easy now.
In Alcoholics Anonymous, does money make the mare go, or is it the root of all evil? We are in the process of solving that riddle. Nobody pretends to have the complete answer. Where the proper use of money ends and its misuse begins is the point in spiritual space we are all seeking. Few group problems are giving thoughtful AAs more concern than this. Everyone is asking, what shall our attitude toward voluntary contributions, paid workers, professionalism, and outside donations? This is really, I'm telling you, this one's going to be interesting too, Monty. And again, I don't read these before we do this show.
Right.
I want to be as surprised as anybody.
And I'm not doing that either. This is great. That's a great way to do this show.
All right. It says here, in the first years of AA, we had no money problems. We met in homes where our wives made sandwiches and coffee. If an individual AA wished to grub steak a fellow alcoholic, he did so. It was purely his own affair. We had no group funds, hence no group money troubles. And it must be recorded that many an old-time AA wishes we could now return to those early days of halcyon simplicity. Knowing that quarrels over material things have crushed the spirit of many a good undertaking, it is often thought that too much money may prove an evil for us too. It's small use yearning for the impossible. Money has entered into our picture, and we are definitely committed to its sparing use. No one would seriously think of abolishing our meeting places and clubs for the sake of avoiding money altogether. Experience has shown that we very much need these facilities, so we must accept whatever risk there is in them. But how shall we keep these risks to a minimum? How shall we traditionally limit the use of money so that it may never topple the spiritual foundation upon which each AA life so completely depends? That is our real problem today. So let us look together at the main phases of our financial situation, seeking to discover what is essential, what is non-essential, what is legitimate and harmless, and what may be dangerous or unnecessary. So again, Bill Wilson has as much experience as anybody in this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. By this time he's gone around the country. He's met with many groups. Many groups had him out there to speak, and 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 the letters that would come into the central office in New York were many. A lot of people had a lot of questions, and a lot of it was kind of silly. It was, we've got this blowhard in our meeting, and he won't shut up.
Right,
Bill, we want you to write him a letter and tell him that he's not welcome as an Alcoholics Anonymous member. I mean, just crazy stuff. Wow. So in aggregating all of this experience, he's formulating these 12 steps or 12 traditions. Mm-hmm. And I'm marveling at this process, especially going over these really early articles.
Yeah.
So suppose we begin with voluntary contributions. Each AA finds itself dropping money in the hat to pay the rent of a meeting place, a club, or the maintenance of his local or national headquarters. Though not all of us believe in clubs, and while a few AAs see no necessity for any local or national offices, it can be said fairly that the vast majority of us believe that these services are basically necessary. Provided such facilities are efficiently handled and their funds properly accounted for, we are only too glad to pledge them our regular support, with the full understanding, of course, that such contributions are in no wise a condition of our AA membership. These particular uses of our money are now generally accepted, and with some qualifications, there's little worry of dire long-range consequences. So even from the beginning, what we experience today, Monty, is in the Northeast, most AA meetings are in churches. Now, there's other areas of the country where there's clubhouses and different things, right? Mm-hmm. But I'd say 9 out of 10 or even more meetings in the Northeast happen in churches. Now, there's a rent, so there needs to be rent. So there needs to be a basket pass. That's the normal way of doing it. It's really, really sad that since like 1962, the traditional donation was $1, and we've had unbelievable inflation, since 1962. That dollar is about 4 cents today. Yeah. And people still putting $1 in the basket. I'll be completely honest with you. My minimum is $3. I usually try to put $5 in the basket, and just making up for that loss of value in the money. That being said, I'm off on a tangent. But there are actually things that you need money for. Alcoholics, I don't know why, but alcoholics like to drink coffee at 9:00 at night. It's the most insane thing you've ever seen.
The candlelight meeting, the candlelight meeting.
God help the coffee maker. If the coffee isn't ready, at 9:00 for the meeting, and it's nuts. But that's become traditional. So you got to pay for the coffee. There's literature. Each group needs to provide some type of literature, and the literature costs money. You can get reimbursed, when people buy the literature, but there has to be a certain amount of money, and they describe it today as a prudent reserve. Mm-hmm. And so, what a prudent reserve is it's like 6 months operating expenses. So as a treasurer, as a modern treasurer, your function is to try to stay pretty close to the prudent reserve. Don't let it get over that. Don't let it get too much under that. And make sure that the group contributions are enough to take care of their rent, to take care of the literature, to take care of the coffee, and maybe there's some other crazy expenses depending on the meeting. But that would be the treasurer's responsibility. When the money goes a little bit above the prudent reserve, there's suggested donations to general service, to your area, to intergroup. There's guidance today on how additional funds above a prudent reserve should be distributed within the Alcoholics Anonymous structure. And I think groups owe it to themselves to have informed treasurers, people who'll know kind of how to do that. Mm-hmm. But that's where we are today. This is where they're banging out the details, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was going to say a group I attended for many, many, many years. If they were having financial difficulties, the first thing to go was the coffee. That was, yeah. We're going to have the literature come hell or high water. Coffee does not take precedence over literature. I got to say, I kind of agree with that. Tell you the truth.
Yeah, listen. I'm not much for coffee, and I'm not much for smoking.
Yeah.
And those are two things that when I showed up around this type of society, those were two things that were very, very important. Addictive substances
yes.
were very, very important. In the AA groups, and I think people are becoming more healthy. I'm not saying that they've gotten rid of coffee. They still have coffee, but a lot of times it's decaf. And a lot of times there's announcements to please don't smoke on the church grounds, or
sure.
Don't throw your cigarette butts around. There's ash cans outside, and very rarely are there meetings where you still smoke. Now when I was living down in North Carolina, you could still smoke in all the meetings, but that's because North Carolina was the home of Winston-Salem. It was part of their culture. Tobacco was part of their culture. And I think you probably can still do that. But most areas of the country, you just don't see it anymore.
So I want to interject. I got to share this short story with you. We were talking about coffee and addictive substances in the meetings. So there was a period of time, I don't see it a whole lot anymore, but there was a period of time when the energy drink craze sprung up, and there was Red Bull was like the big one, then Monster, and then Rockstar. Those were the three biggies, right? And I thought, and I am a coffee guy. I've got a very expensive espresso machine in my kitchen at home. I've got a Keurig next to it. I've got a Nespresso machine next to that. I mean, it's just ridiculous, But anyway, so I thought I was going to make a healthy decision and stop drinking coffee and start drinking these energy drinks. We didn't know a whole lot about them like we do today and how horrible they really are for you. But I'm sitting in a meeting, and this just shows you the addictive nature of us human beings. I got two of these gigantic rock stars, and I'm bringing I'm bringing them to the meeting, and it was the night meeting, right? And I'm sitting there, and about meeting 3, as a guy that at the time he could be considered my service sponsor, I suppose. He's sitting next to me, and he's writing on a matchbook cover. He's writing something, and he folds the matchbook cover over, and he slides it over to me, and I open it up, and it says, "Are we drinking for the effect?" Oh, man. That was the beginning of the decline of my energy drink consumption. And it wasn't long after that I just gave him up altogether, and I don't drink them at all. But boy, he called me out, and he did it in a way that was gentle and humorous. And he just looked at me and had this grin on his face. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we're people of extremes.
We are.
You know what I mean? It's like one Red Bull is good. 13 have to be better.
Right.
That's our nature.
Yep.
It says, yet some concern does remain, arising mostly in connection with our clubs, local offices, and national headquarters. Because these places customarily employ paid workers, and because their operation implies a certain amount of business management, it is sometimes felt that we may get bogged down with a heavy officialdom, or still worse, a downright professionalization of AA. Though it must be said that these doubts are not always unreasonable, we have already had enough experience to relieve them in large part. To begin with, it seems most certain that we need never be overwhelmed by our clubs, local offices, or general headquarters at New York City. These are places of service. They cannot really control or govern AA. If any of them were to become inefficient or overbearing, the remedy is simple enough. The average AA would stop its financial support until conditions were changed. As our AA membership does not depend on fees, or dues, we can always take our special facilities or leave them alone. These services must always serve us well or go out of business. Because no one is compelled to support them, they can never dictate, nor can they stray from the main body of AA tradition for long. That's really a great statement. He's basically saying, if New York General Service isn't doing what we want it to do, you know, we can, our protest can be financial.
Wow.
You know, he's given us permission in 1946 to do that.
Yeah.
In direct line with the principle of taking our facilities or leaving them alone, there is an encouraging tendency to incorporate all such special functions separately if they involve any great amount of money, property, or management. More and more, the AA groups are realizing that they are spiritual entities, not business organizations. Of course, the smaller club rooms or meeting places often remain unincorporated because their business aspect is only nominal. But as large growth takes place, it is usually found wise to incorporate and set the club apart from surrounding groups. Mm-hmm. Support of the club then becomes an individual matter rather than a group matter. If, however, the club also provides a central office secretary serving the surrounding area, it seems only fair that the group treasuries in that area should shoulder this particular expense, because such a secretary serves all groups, even though the club itself may not. Our evolution in large AA centers is beginning to indicate most clearly that while it is a proper function of a cluster of groups or their central committee to support a paid secretary for their area, it is not a group or central committee function to support clubs financially. Not all AAs care for clubs. Therefore, club support has to come mainly from those individual AAs who need or like clubs, which, by the way, is the majority. But the majority ought not try to coerce the minority into supporting clubs they do not want or need. You know, in our area, we don't support any clubs because we don't have a lot of them. And what happens in clubs is they almost all are separately incorporated, which means they're run by a board. And the AA meetings that meet in those clubhouses pay rent to the clubhouse, which is funneled through financial mechanisms of the board. Mm-hmm. And that seems to make sense. That way an AA meeting can up and leave if it wants to,
sure.
You know, and a lot of times that works really, really well.
Yeah, I saw a post, and I don't know if they're still having trouble. I can't remember where it is, and it was one of the recovery recording artists, a guy named by the name of Joe E. Fingas. He's a piano player, bluegrass, jazz kind of stuff, but all recovery, right? He belonged to a club somewhere back east, and they had been around for decades, but they were losing their lease because they didn't have the money. And so they started like GoFundMe page and all that stuff. But I noticed that, and I think this was done really well. There wasn't any mention of any affiliation with Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what I mean? It was you knew it was an AA club or a building where AA met, rather. All the members that were raising money were AA members, but I never saw any AA logos. I never saw any mention of Alcoholics Anonymous itself. And I thought that's the right way to go about it.
Yeah. You know, to a degree within Alcoholics Anonymous and the meetings and clubhouses and everything, it operates like a self-cleaning oven. You know, the stuff that's not vital burns off. So if a club isn't really functioning well in an area and it just isn't getting the people because it's crappy or whatever, and it just isn't getting the people in there, you know, they're having their meeting somewhere else, then it closes. Yeah. You know, the same thing happens with meetings. When meetings are not vibrant enough to attract enough people to be supportive of that meeting, you know, that meeting can close. I've been part of home groups that have shut their doors, you know, and it was time for that to happen. And
it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, it's an organic, natural natural, progression, I think, within the society.
Sure.
Of course, clubs also get a certain amount of help from meetings held in them. Where central meetings for an area take place in a club, it is customary to divide the collection between the club and the central committee for the area, heavily favoring the club, of course, because the club is providing the meeting place. The same arrangement may be entered into between the club and any particular group which wishes to use the club, whether for meeting or entertainment. Generally speaking, the board of directors of a club looks after the financial management and the social life of the place. But strictly AA matters remain the function of the surrounding groups themselves. This division of activities by no means the rule everywhere. It is offered as a suggestion only, much in keeping, however, with the present trend. So again, the survival of the fittest. And he's paying attention to all this stuff and developing these best practices, the suggested points of tradition, or whatever he wants to call them at this period of time.
Yeah.
A large club or central office usually means one or more paid workers. What about them? Are they professionalizing AA? About this, there is a hot debate every time a club or central committee gets large enough to require paid help. On this subject, we've all done a pile of fuzzy thinking, and I would be one of the first to plead guilty to that charge. The reason for our fuzzy thinking is the usual one. It is fear. To each of us, the ideal of AA, however short we may be of it personally, is a thing of beauty and perfection. It is a power greater than ourselves, which has lifted us out of the quicksand and set us safe on the shore. The slightest thought of marring our ideal, much less bartering it for gold, is to most of us unthinkable. So we're constantly on the alert against the rise within AA of a paid class of practitioners or missionaries. In AA, where each of us is a goodwill practitioner and missionary in his own right, there's no need for anyone to be paid for simple 12-step work.
Amen.
A purely spiritual undertaking. While I suppose fear of any kind ought to be deplored, I must confess that I'm rather glad that we exercise such great vigilance in this critical matter. Absolutely. For fun and for free is our 12-step work.
Yeah.
You can look at it from one side of the spectrum. It's the maintenance of our spiritual condition that keeps us in the atmosphere of recovery, where the sunlight of the Spirit can get to us and do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. That's certainly one side of it. The other side. The other side of it is that, we become compassionate. When we recover from alcoholism, we become compassionate. We develop a service ethic. We get charitable with our time. Yes. We're no longer spending time selfishly. We're trying to find ways to benefit other people. That's the transformation that happens within recovery. So yes, I could never imagine somebody charging, a sponsorship fee, or you're going to go through. I take people through the steps for $250. Yeah, I'm sure that happens, Monty, but it is extremely rare. I've not heard of it happening in 30 years.
The only thing that I discovered that somebody was kind of doing that. But the only thing I've heard on a regular basis, but I haven't heard in a long time, is on the sponsorship thing and the question of, are you willing to go to any length, and then taking somebody hostage to mow your lawn or wash your car every week. If you're willing to do anything, then you're gonna come over and do yard work for me. That's gonna prove that you're serious. And that's nothing gets me much hotter under the collar than that.
You are going to get me on a tangent because there are groups and there are sponsorship lineages that are, they're like a cultish pyramid kind of a thing.
Gosh.
Like word comes down from on high and everybody steps to and get told where to go and what to do and all that. And all that is just an enormous playing of God. We share our experience, strength, and hope. And I come from a sponsorship lineage that really is just about, get somebody through the steps so they can get in touch with a power greater than themselves, and they can get less reliant upon me.
Amen.
I want you to be free of reliance on me as soon as possible, and I'm not going to have a list of of action items for you to do. That's playing God. If you truly have a recovery experience, you're going to find your own way to be of service. You're going to find your own way to be out there carrying the message.
Right.
That's what I've seen.
Yeah,
but
right.
That's
on.
just me. I'm on the liberal end, I guess, of that spectrum.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the other one that gets me going is that thing we hear, never say no, never say no. And I'm like, listen, I had to learn to say no. That was part of my self-care and my recovery, because I wouldn't stop saying yes. And I got so busy doing good stuff, I wasn't paying attention to my own step work.
Monty, you got no idea. I am pre-programmed to, if I have the time, to allow you to take it. It's just in my nature, right? And I keep swearing to myself, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to start saying no. I got to cut this out. I'm speaking 4 times a week, every single week somewhere.
I know.
I got to get some balance. I got to, but I think I'm just programmed, to say yes.
Okay. Okay. Well,
and my wife looks at me like I'm crazy. You're going where? That's a 3-hour drive.
I'm laughing.
Or getting on an airplane. I get on. You know me. I get on a lot of airplanes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm pre-programmed, but I get what you're saying.
I totally get it, and that's I have trouble saying no to the treatment facility that I have service rate. It's like the thing today. I mean, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you know what? The 12 steps render us. They do not render us perfect. You know what they render us? Useful.
Yeah,
that's the end game.
Indeed. They do indeed.
Becoming useful.
Yeah.
So anyway, I love these tangents, but let me get back to them. Yet there is a principle upon which I believe we can honestly solve our dilemma. It is this: a janitor can sweep the floor, a cook can boil the beef, a steward can eject a troublesome drunk, a secretary can manage an office, an editor can get out a newspaper, all, I am sure, without professionalizing AA. If we didn't do these jobs ourselves, we would have to hire non-alcoholics to do them for us. We would not ask any non-alcoholic to do these things full-time without pay. So why should some of us, who are earning a good living ourselves in the outside world, expect other AAs to be full-time caretakers, cooks, or secretaries? Why should these AAs work for nothing at jobs which the rest of us could not or would not attempt ourselves? Or why, for that matter, should they be any less well-paid than for similar labor elsewhere? And what difference should it make in the course of their duties they do some 12-step if they do some 12-step work besides? Clearly, the principle seems to be that we may pay for special services, but never for straight 12-step work. So that paragraph explains the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think that, we're living that way today. We have a central office in South Plainfield, New Jersey for Area 44. And there are people that work there and there are people that get paid, as they should, because they're not doing 12-step work. They're doing secretarial work or whatever.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of volunteers who answer the phones because there's 12-step work to be had answering the phones. So that makes sense. But fixing the electrical or polishing the floor or something.
Yeah,
I think it would not be spiritual to keep expecting people to do that as volunteer work. That's the sponsor who makes you cut his lawn. It's not right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's abusive to me.
Yeah. So how then could AA be professionalized? Quite simply, I might, for example, hire an office and hang on the door a sign reading, Bill W., Alcoholics Anonymous therapist. charges $10 per hour. That would be a face-to-face treatment of alcoholism for a fee. And I would surely be trading on the name Alcoholics Anonymous, a purely amateur organization, to enlarge my professional practice. That would be professionalizing AA. And how? It would be quite legal, but hardly ethical. And very rarely do you see people do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does this mean we should criticize therapists as a class, even AAs who might choose to go into that field? Not at all. Now, this is important, too, because even today, you can get Alcoholics Anonymous members who think if you're a therapist at a treatment center, there's something wrong with you spiritually.
I hear it all the time.
You know, there's still prejudice about that,
mm-hmm.
Monty.
Yep.
And in 1946, Bill recognized that there should be no criticism of this. There should be no adverse attitude toward people that do that,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's correct.
The point is that no one ought to advertise himself as an AA therapist. We are strictly amateur. There could be no such thing, right? So what they don't advertise as Alcoholics Anonymous therapists. They're CDACs, which means they've been trained, or they're clinical social workers, or whatever designation these people end up getting, and they have to have 2,000 volunteer hours. It's not easy, and they have some clinical training. So what they're doing isn't strictly AA 12-step work in the treatment centers. Mm-hmm. Treatment centers do treatment. It's uncovering and discovering, and I believe the recovery really happens within the 12-step landscape.
Mm-hmm.
That's me.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a distortion of the facts, which none of us could afford to try. As the tennis player has to drop his amateur status when he turns professional, so should AAs who become therapists cease publishing their AA connection. Well, I doubt if many AAs ever go into the field of alcohol therapy. None ought to feel excluded, especially if they are trained social workers, psychologists, or psychiatrists. But they certainly ought never to use their AA connection publicly or in such a way as to make people feel AA has such a special class within its own ranks. That is where we all must draw the line. Now, when I showed up in the late 80s. There were treatment centers everywhere. Monty, what had happened was the Hughes Act had been, it was a parity legislation, and it had been put through around 1970 by Governor Hughes. And what it did was it made it incumbent upon reimbursement agencies to pay for alcoholism and drug addiction treatment. Made it, incumbent. Mm-hmm. So you could, and there wasn't a lot of oversight back then over the field of addiction treatment. I mean, you had to have some basic, ducks in a row to be able to reimburse for alcoholism treatment, but it wasn't like it was today. And there were treatment centers everywhere because of this parity legislation. Now, managed care came in, right? Managed care came in around 93 or so. And we went from having 10,000 beds in the country for alcoholism treatment to 1,000 beds. I mean, we lost 90% of our beds when managed care started for alcoholism. But during that period, that heyday, that period of time, AA members who were retired were becoming counselors with no real training. I mean, you could basically go into a treatment center and call yourself a counselor, and there were a lot of people who were sober a year who became alcoholism counselors. Yeah, and this really was a problem back, in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm not saying everybody that counseled in the treatment centers around that time was doing a bad job. I'm just saying that it was everywhere, and there were actually people who believed that you got sober, you got a year, and you started on your hours to become an alcoholism counselor. Mm-hmm. They thought that's what recovery was. And honestly, today the delineation, the line of demarcation is more responsible and more visible than it was 30 some years ago. But I truly believe that, Bill's guidance in those last paragraphs have really transpired a lot in the field. Now, not everywhere, but a lot.
Now I'm gonna share something here, and I have no problem sharing this. It's something that has concerned me. So part of my job as the director of recovery education at the Adult and Teen Challenge program before I retired, one of the things that was, because we have an arm of that is actually state certified, right?
Right.
But it's a separate entity because we're a faith-based program, so they have to make it a separate entity because there's certain things that as a private faith-based organization, we're not going to allow the government to come in and tell us what to do. But the separate entity, which is called Life Renewal, is the certified alcohol and drug counselor piece. However, being that I was the director of addiction studies and all that kind of stuff, one of the things that Adult and Teen Challenge required of me is that first, I get my certification as a peer support specialist, adult addictions, and that second, I become Oregon board certified as a recovery mentor, which came after the peer support specialist thing. When I went through my training, and there was hours, it was like, oh my gosh, it was particularly for the board certified recovery mentor piece. But do you know what? And it was it wasn't an organization that was affiliated. It was an organization that had been approved by SAMHSA to teach these courses and give you these hours. And then every 2 years, you had CEU credits you had to keep up on, right? Do you know, Chris, that in all the hours I spent in that, I don't remember anything that had anything to do with recovery.
Treatment is treatment.
I was blown away. I mean, I understand.
Clinical is clinical, Monty.
I understand if they're not focusing on the 12-step thing because there's another piece. I got all that, right? I learned a lot of history about mental health and mental illness, but I was still waiting for the recovery piece. And I'm saying, how can you give a certificate out that says you're a board-certified recovery mentor, but you didn't teach anything about recovery? Again, we don't criticize and we don't judge. But that was my experience. Now, I will tell you, I learned a lot. There was a lot of stuff I learned. There was techniques that I learned that I use today. There was a lot of stuff. But as far as the recovery piece go, I was baffled, bro.
And I think that's what makes us uniquely useful in those positions.
Yeah.
Having recovery experience and all of a sudden you're working in that position or whatever, I think that makes you uniquely useful.
Yeah.
Thank God some of us do that stuff.
Sure.
What I do is every Wednesday night, I give a talk on the book Alcoholics Anonymous at a very well-known treatment center, in my area. Mm-hmm. This is one of the first treatment centers that ever started. They started. I think there was High Watch, and then the one that I'm at.
Right.
So it goes back 70 years or something. This particular treatment center, and I go in there and I give a talk. A recovery talk.
Sure.
Now, a lot of the work they're doing in there, it's some of it's recovery, some of it's clinical, mm-hmm. some of it's psychological, and they do what they do. One of the things that you have to realize is you really can't get reimbursements for spiritual treatment.
No,
it has to have some type of clinical. Evidence-based something or other for these reimbursement agencies to see it as legitimate. And it's sad because a lot of times what these people remember from their treatment episodes is the recovery speakers.
Yeah.
That's what gets them.
Yeah.
That's what hooks them.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the reasons why a good treatment center is bringing in outside speakers from recovery groups.
Yep. Yeah. Now I meet Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have assigned guys that I meet with as a spiritual advisor, and that's more in the realm of kind of applying the principles of recovery from a biblical format, because we're a faith-based organization. But on Wednesday night, once a year, I go in for 12 to 14 weeks and do a 12-step workshop. And what I do there, and I can't even imagine being paid for that. I would never charge for that. It's just my passion. It's my love. I love what I do. And I go in, and the first thing I do is I do a whole hour, and we stream in the Women's Center in Eugene, so they get to watch on the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, because there's a lot of inaccurate information in the faith community, in the faith community about AA. And I want to dispel those inaccurate pieces, so when people get ready to do their exit plan and develop an aftercare, they're going to be going into places like NA, AA, Celebrate Recovery. They're going to be going, more than likely, most of them, into a 12-step world. And I want them to understand, this is what this means. It doesn't mean this. This has been misunderstood by some well-meaning people, but please understand that this is what it's saying, not this. So then they get that, not so that when they go out and they go to these meetings, they can bash people over the head like I did years ago. You're doing that wrong. No, but so you can understand, and you can eat the meat, spit out the bones, and apply what the book is really saying. And then the weeks after that, we go through each step for 12 weeks, and we spend a couple of weeks on 4. But we go through them with the understanding that this in no way is to replace working one-on-one with a sponsor when you leave this program. This isn't doing that. This is barely scratching the surface. This is not a practical application and implementation of the 12 steps. This is a pre-introduction to an introduction, if nothing else. But we have a blast with it. It's a total fun. I mean, people that have come out of a 12-step history go, I was never told that. I never knew that. I never knew the history. Man, that's rich. I mean, and it's just a blast to do it. I could never imagine anybody charging for that once you have that information.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And my experience is very similar.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful work. I mean, besides owing a debt I can't fully repay, a favorite slogan of a lot of us, it's a gas, man. It's a blast. People that don't think that's not fun, I don't know what's wrong with them.
It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun than it sounds.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's like coffee. It smells a lot better than it tastes, right?
Yeah.
Well, next week, the topic, we're kind of continuing on the financial thing here, right? Policy on gift funds will be next week's topic and article. All right, closing thoughts.
Nice. No, yeah, I'm looking forward to next week, Monty.
All right, good deal. All right, my friends, listen, don't forget we have a dedicated webpage for all of these episodes. Visit us at take12radio.com. Click on the Recovery Workshops banner, and there you'll find the link to Walking Through the Language of the Heart. And if you'd like to drop us a comment, you can do that on any of the podcasting platforms, on YouTube, or just send us an email at take12radio@comcast.net. Don't hang up, Chris. I have a question for you. Folks, until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man along with our good friend Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.